So I feel like this is a very important video to make. And a lot of times when a topic is really important to me, I just kind of put it off because I want it to be perfect. And I don't know, I just think it's time that I talk about this. And we're going to be covering today female infertility. And if this is something that you're dealing with, I know that this can be a very emotional topic to talk about. It can be very important to you as well. And what we're going to be talking about today is a different viewpoint on infertility. So if you have been searching and researching this topic and you're getting very frustrated, or maybe the mainstream interventions have not worked for you, this is going to be a different point of view than you have seen before. You have not heard this information from a fertility expert. This is not something that they would tell you. This is going to be a different point of view. And sometimes when you're really stuck, a different point of view can be very helpful. So I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to give you any medical advice here, and I don't want the information that you learn here to restrict you from getting medical help if you need that. And there really are circumstances that can restrict a woman's ability to have a baby. That really does happen. But I've also seen firsthand from women who've been told that they're not going to be able to have a baby, and all of a sudden they have a baby. So even in my own experience, me and my wife type person, when we first started to try to have a baby, it was not working out. I was doing my best. I thought I was doing the right stuff, but it was not working. And then as I learned this information and we started to implement the things that I'm going to explain to you in this video, after doing this for a little bit, when we decided to try again, it happened very quickly. And we now have 2 kids, and they're easily the best part of my life, and it's not even close. It's by far. So when I just think sometimes, like, what if I didn't know that? It's unbelievable to me. So if I can help just one person turn this situation around for themselves, this video will be totally worth it. And I just kind of feel like there's somebody out there that's going to forever remember the day that they watched this video. So let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
Now just remember, what we're going to talk about here you have not seen in any kind of medical website or anything like that, but if you're a fan of common sense, you're going to see this and be like, well that makes sense, and why didn't anybody ever tell me this? But don't be upset at your medical professional for not sharing this with you. What we're going to talk about here, there's nothing that a medication or that a medical procedure can correct these things. So why would it be in their training? It's just not in their training. Don't be upset at them for not explaining this to you. But when we're looking at creating this other human being, we really need to understand resources a little bit. And what happens is to build this human takes a lot of resources. You need vitamins and minerals and amino acids and all these nutrient cofactors that it takes to put this human being together. You're building a whole human there. That really takes a lot of resources to do that. And that's the same with anything that you would want to build. If you were building a house, you would need resources to build that house. You would need nails and a hammer and wood and bricks or whatever you were going to build that house out of. You would need resources to build that house. Otherwise, your housewarming party would just be a bunch of people standing in your yard eating egg salad. It's like, we're the house. So you need resources to build something. The problem is, it's very common today for an individual to not have enough resources for the body to function optimally. And we kind of have this viewpoint, well, if I ate enough that I can walk to my car and drive to work, then I have all the fuel I need. But the reality is that there's a lot of functions in the body that need a lot of different types of resources, different types of vitamins, different types of minerals, different types of amino acids, different types of fats. They're all very important for the body to operate the way that it really wants to operate. So if a person is missing some of these resources, the body's not going to be able to function the way that it's really supposed to function. So we can get an idea of where our resources are just by looking at our blood pressure. And a lot of people view blood pressure as, well, it's not high, so everything's great. But low blood pressure can be an indication of some things going wrong. So if you look at your blood pressure at least 2 hours after a meal, but not first thing in the morning, it shouldn't be fasted, it should be after a meal. And if that systolic number, which is the top number, if that's below 112, that's an indication that minerals and other resources are going low in the system. So when we're looking at the blood pressure, it can be a reflection of things like minerals and protein a little bit and sugar and even filth and junk that maybe the body's having a hard time getting rid of. That can thicken up the blood and raise the pressure needed to push that through the system. So when we're looking at blood pressure, we're looking at a variable of different factors that can change what that pressure is going to be. But when that pressure is low, that can really be a strong indication that minerals in the system are low, because minerals are part of what thickens up that blood and raises the blood pressure. So there's actually a lot of symptoms and health issues that can come about from low blood pressure and low minerals in the system. One thing that we see is that one of the things I became popular for first was menstrual cramps. And when I first started learning how the human body works and about bioindividuality, I helped this girl fix her horrible menstrual cramps. She couldn't even leave the house for 4 days. She just had to ball up in the fetal position. And I helped her correct that, and then she told all her friends, and then like every girl in town was like showing up at my house, hey, you're the cramps guy kind of thing. And the reason that so many people were finding help with this is because we were helping them lift the resources so that that menstrual cycle can work correctly. Because what happens is basically when the body doesn't have enough resources to create this other human being and still function correctly, Mother Nature will be like, all right, this isn't going to work out. We don't have enough to build this other person and still allow this person to have all their functions operate, so we're just going to shut down this reproductive cycle. And then the woman loses her menstrual cycle. The period doesn't show up. And we see this a lot with female athletes, because these athletes are basically burning off all these resources with all these athletic activities, and they're burning off faster than they can bring it in. So maybe they have problems bringing in resources, and we'll talk about how that can happen in a minute. But if they're basically burning off a lot more, then there's a deficit, and the body doesn't have what it needs to run all of its normal operations. The body is not designed for a hurdle race. It's designed to operate in all these functions that need to rebuild and repair and all these things that the body has to do. So when those resources go low, one of the first things to shut down can be that menstrual cycle. And it's viewed as a protective measure. It's basically the body saying, look, if we try to build this other person right now, it's going to take so many of these resources that you hardly have enough of that you're not going to have enough left. And you're not even going to be able to survive or function as a human being. So we're going to shut this down to protect this would-be mother from these problems that can come about from resources going way too low. So when we're looking at this infertility issue, this can just be a magnified version. Now, maybe somebody's still getting their period. Maybe they have enough for that cycle to operate, but the body's still feeling like we don't have enough to really create a whole other human. We have fewer resources than that. So we're going to restrict the ability for this individual to have a baby inside them growing. That's going to take too many resources, so we're going to restrict that from happening for right now until these resources come back up. So let's look at some studies where we can see some connections to these ideas. And here we see a study on the complex relationship between infertility and psychological distress. And in this study, we see in a study of 112 females with infertility, some types of psychiatric disorders, for example, anxiety and depression, were indicated to be present in 40% of the participants. So that's a really big percentage. And then we look at this study here where we have an association of low blood pressure with anxiety and depression. And so we're seeing these types of things show up with low blood pressure. And this is what we see with our clients. We see it very common when someone's dealing with depression or anxiety that there can be low blood pressure and low resources, and the body is kind of having a hard time functioning correctly. Minerals in the system is what allows the body to send signals from the body to the brain and from the brain back to the body. And when there's not enough minerals, there's not enough conductivity for those signals to travel correctly, and they get kind of dropped off. And then a person can really feel depressed, or maybe they'll deal with anxiety or other type of mental or emotional issues. Now, there are other causes of depression and anxiety and some of these mental and emotional issues, but this is very common that we see this when someone's dealing with low blood pressure, we'll see these issues kind of come up. In this other study, we see depression is associated with decreased blood pressure, but antidepressant use increases the risk of hypertension. And so what that means is we sort of see that a lot of the antidepressants out there, shut up phone, I'm talking about stuff. A lot of the antidepressants out there will actually work by restricting a person's ability to pee out their minerals. So they'll hold more of these minerals in the system The minerals lift, the signals can travel better, and they feel less depressed. But then over time, what this study is seeing that as people use antidepressants longer and longer, then it can lead to a higher risk of hypertension, which makes sense. If a medication is restricting a person's ability to pee out their minerals, then those minerals would accumulate more and more and raise that blood pressure. So that would make sense if that's what's really going on there. But that also gives us another indication of, wow, this really may be what's going on with this depression stuff. If these medications are working by raising the blood pressure, maybe this low blood pressure is really something to look at when we're looking at this depression type situation. But when we look at this correlation between depression and low resources and mental and emotional issues, we also see that when a woman is pregnant, it can be more common for her to deal with issues like depression or mental and emotional issues. Like when a pregnant woman flies off the handle and kind of goes nuts for no reason, we all view that as like, oh, that's normal, she's pregnant. Of course that's going to happen. But we don't really look to see why that would be the case. We just kind of assume that, oh, there's all these hormones flying around going crazy and making her a little bit nuts. But the reality is that a lot of her resources are going towards this child. It's going towards building this child, and she doesn't have enough left over to function the way that she would normally function. Low resources can really affect the way that we function. It's so common that there's national commercials about, oh man, these people just don't act the way that they usually act when they're really hungry, so have this candy bar. So it's common that we all see this every single day, but we don't really put two and two together when it comes to somebody having a reason that resources go low and now they're also acting like they haven't eaten anything all day. It's really about what resources are available to the person and how that's affecting how that body is operating. So when we're seeing correlations between like depression and anxiety and things for people who are dealing with infertility, we can kind of say, oh, well, this could be because the resources are low. So if they're already dealing with depression and anxiety, it could be a sign that resources are low, and all of a sudden now it makes sense that the infertility would show up. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to say, well, they're depressed because they can't have a baby, which certainly is a possibility and certainly can be a factor. But when we're seeing the numbers this high, we really have to understand that we should look at this a little bit differently. We should be looking at the fact that there's other indications of this. You know, postpartum depression is very common. And after this woman gives all of her resources to this child, when the child exits the body, now all of those resources are gone and the woman's left with hardly anything left. Well, why wouldn't she feel a little bit depressed? Why would her body operate at an optimal way when the resources just aren't there to help the body function correctly? And when we look at why this might happen, we see this study about a review of complex relationship between irritable bowel syndrome and infertility. And this study showed that there was a high percentage of individuals who were dealing with IBS and those types of issues who were also dealing with infertility. And this kind of takes us to the most common reason that an individual might be dealing with low resources, and that's digestive malfunctions. So when we look at the study with the IBS, that makes sense. Well, they have a significant digestive issue, and of course the study was more looking at the oxidative stress that IBS might create. But from what we understand and what you're about to learn, it makes sense that somebody dealing with IBS would have lower resources, especially if it was a diarrhea type IBS situation where all the resources are just screaming through the system faster than they can be assimilated. How would the person really be getting all the nutrients out of that food if it's running through there with crazy diarrhea all the time? So when we look at this digestive function, we should be making stomach acid when we consume food. That stomach makes an acid that really helps us break that food down so that we can get all the minerals and amino acids and other nutrients out of that food. And then once the food is acidified, it leaves the stomach and comes down here into the duodenum, and that's when the gallbladder squirts this alkaline bile down to help neutralize those acids. Both of those functions are very important because when that acid product meets the alkaline bile product, those opposite pHs colliding creates like this sizzle that really helps bust the food apart and helps us get all the nutrients out of that food. That bile is really important so that we can emulsify the dietary fats we consume as well. And that also helps us access fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K. Like those are pretty important for the body to function correctly. So the problem is that it's very common today for someone not to be making enough stomach acid for a wide variety of reasons. And it's also very common for someone's bile to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. And then it won't come down and help neutralize those acids and help us really digest that food correctly. So for a person to get this sizzle, to really bust their food apart and get all the nutrients out of that food, they need both sides of digestion working correctly. They need the stomach acid side working, and they need that bile flowing correctly. That's how we break that food down to get the elemental nutrients that become the building blocks that the body not only uses to rebuild and repair itself, but also if it wants to build this other human. So the body can't really do anything with a salami sandwich. You can't use a salami sandwich to make a salami sandwich baby. The digestive functions need to break that salami sandwich down into vitamins and minerals and amino acids and all these nutrient cofactors that become the building blocks for this other human being. So if a person's dealing with any type of digestive symptom at all, any burping or bloating or acid reflux or constipation or diarrhea or nausea or indigestion, like maybe food just kind of feels like it sits there like a rock for 6 hours in the stomach, or even skin or acne issues, all of these are signs that one or both sides of that digestive process are not really working correctly. So if that's the case, we really have to fix those things to be able to pull all the nutrients out of the food that we're eating. Otherwise, we're just eating the food and kind of wasting the effort. We're not getting all the nutrients out of that food. Another problem that could happen is that maybe a person has some type of overgrowth, whether it's in the stomach or the small intestine, like a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or SIBO issue like all the cool kids have these days. And if there's some type of bacterial or yeast or fungal overgrowth in either of these locations, that can restrict the ability to acidify the stomach correctly, but it can also affect our ability to really get the nutrients out of that food. So if someone had some type of overgrowth, they would need to correct that so they can maximize this digestive process and get all the nutrients out of that food. So if you're dealing with any of those symptoms at all, that's something that would be worth putting effort towards correcting to at least make sure your body can get the nutrients out of the food that you're eating. So I'm going to put some free resources in the description below. My book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4 of that book kind of walk you through figuring out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and what steps you can take to help improve those issues. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description so that you can get the whole book totally for free, and then you can just jump to chapters 3 and 4. And we also have a free digestion course that goes over those similar things. So if you prefer to watch videos instead of reading a book, we'll put a link to that free course below as well. But that becomes an important topic when you're really looking at why would resources be low in the body and why would these problems be coming about. You know, this IBS thing that we talked about. And another thing that really can be a factor when it comes to fertility is stress. And a lot of these studies that I'm going to put the links to those in the description below the video as well too, but a lot of them really reference stress a lot, and they find that with the people that were dealing with the higher levels of stress, that infertility was much more common. And if you think about how the body works, when the body is in a stress state, you know, you're running from a lion or something like that, the body changes the way that it operates. It changes how functions go so that it can optimize for survival. It needs to optimize its ability to run away from this lion. But the way that we live today, we're stressed when we're not being chased by a lion. We're stressed because our boss is a jerk, or we're late in traffic, or maybe we just can't afford our rent or something like that. There's a lot of things that can create stress in the body, but the body doesn't know that your boss is a jerk. The body views that stress like you're running from a lion. So it's going to change the way that it operates, and it's going to optimize for survival rather than these other things that the body would normally be doing. Think about this. There isn't a scenario in nature where you would need to run from a lion and reproduce at the same time. There's no situation where that would happen. So there's no reason for the body to optimize for both of those circumstances. A lot of people, when they talk about, you know, mammals and humans and things like that, they view this as another protective measure. Well, we don't need to reproduce right now because we're in danger. We need to focus more on that danger and surviving, or if we put energy towards reproducing, It's pointless if we just die. So we should put all these resources towards survival, and then once there's not an emergency, the body will adjust back to optimizing for reproduction. And the real ripoff about this stress stuff is that if someone really wants to have a baby and they're dealing with infertility issues, well, that's another stress that's piling up on top of any stress that they're already dealing with. Especially when you talk about like the IVF procedure type situations where someone's going to do a medical procedure to try to create this pregnancy, and basically a lot of people are spending, like their life savings on this one shot of making this happen. And here we're going to do this procedure and then hope it works, don't be stressed about it. Well, that's a really big stress. And so I always really try to tell women, you got to find any way you can to reduce whatever stress you can to put your body in a more optimal situation. You want to put everything you can into your favor if you're dealing with this infertility issue. And when we look at this IVF thing, we can see this study where depressive symptoms during late pregnancy and early parenthood following assisted reproductive technologies. So basically what they found is that when somebody did like an IVF type situation, that there was a much higher percentage for them to deal with either depression during that pregnancy or after that pregnancy. And if you think about it, that makes sense, because it's not like someone who could just have a baby on their own is going to do an IVF thing. It's very costly. They're just not going to do that. So we have to assume that anybody doing an IVF thing was already having trouble creating that pregnancy. And if that was coming about because of low resources, then of course it would make sense that they would be more likely to be dealing with those depressive type issues during or after the pregnancy, because that would really magnify bringing those resources down even more. A woman was kind of set up to where she couldn't get pregnant because resources were low, so Mother Nature was trying to protect her by restricting this pregnancy because resources were so low. But when she manufactured that, it would make sense that that would really lower resources even more, that would be an individual that would end up with much lower resources than most women who just had a baby. So it would make sense that those things would be magnified a little bit. And with this stress, that can also elevate stress hormones in the body, like estrogen. And estrogen has been shown to thicken up that bile when it goes really high. So high estrogen has the ability to thicken up that bile so it won't flow correctly and basically turn off part of that digestive process that we need to get all the minerals and nutrients out of that food. And that can also lead us to some of these more advanced issues that we see with infertility and things like PCOS and endometriosis. And it's really common. People understand now that endometriosis is often a high estrogen issue, that there's a lot of estrogen elevated when someone's dealing with endometriosis in most cases. And when we're talking about infertility and endometriosis, I'll put a link in the description below to a study that showed us that there was almost 2.5 times a greater chance of being diagnosed with endometriosis if the individual had used some type of oral contraceptive for 5 years or longer. And of course we know that those often have the ability to really raise estrogen in the system, so that makes a lot of sense. And it also makes sense why they might have other issues of of infertility if they're bringing resources down by estrogen going high, turning off that bile flow and restricting the whole digestive process. So when someone's looking at even advanced issues, sometimes when you can fix these things, these major malfunctions like digestive malfunctions, all of a sudden you can help the body function. You can bring down the stress of the body. Low resources is a stress on the body. It's like the body's like trying to pay $800 worth of bills with $12. It doesn't have the resources to run all the operations it needs to run. That stresses the body out. Now the body's more stressed, which can raise stress hormones and raise estrogen even more and restrict the digestive process even more. So I'm not saying that fixing digestion is going to correct your endometriosis, but when you can put anything that you can in your favor, fixing digestive functions is not an impossible task to do. It can take some work, but we hear from people every day that do it. So when you can put something else in your favor and allow the body to function a little bit closer to the way that it's supposed to function, some really good stuff can happen. So when you look at other natural advice from other videos and experts about infertility, a lot of times they're going to show you all the nutrients that you need. This nutrient, you got to have this because it does this with fertility, and you got to have potassium, or they can't really do this when you're trying to create a baby. And the reality in our point of view is that if you can just fix any digestive malfunctions that are restricting the body's ability to bring resources in, you can get those resources from the foods that you're eating. But you can also take other steps that can speed up that process of lifting resources. And the basis is always digesting better. That's always the most important thing when you're trying to lift the resources in the body. Using an unrefined salt can be very helpful. A lot of people run from salt because the doctor told their Uncle Bill it was going to kill him. And that doesn't mean that everybody needs to avoid salt. And just normal table salt is not that beneficial, but if you use an unrefined salt, it has a lot of good minerals in there that the body really needs, and that can be very beneficial. Consuming bone broth can be a really big help, and we'll put a link in the description below for our video on who should drink bone broth. But if somebody's dealing with infertility issues, I'm a big fan of them drinking bone broth because you're basically getting all of these nutrients in a liquid form. It goes in very easily. It's very easily for the body to assimilate it. You don't have to digest bone broth correctly to get all of those nutrients in there. They just go right in. Plus, it has a lot of nutrients that are harder to get from other sources today because when you cook those bones in that water for a day or two, you're really pulling a lot of these nutrients out that we don't really get in other sources. I also like to see people increase nutrient-rich foods, especially like organ meats. But one thing when you're thinking about consuming organ meats is a person really needs to be able to break those down to get those nutrients out. Organ meats are going to be harder to digest than like a chicken breast. So if somebody has digestive malfunctions, they really need to make that a priority before that step is really going to help them. Another thing that can be really helpful is liver pills. And those are pretty easy to access. Some good, high quality, grass-fed liver pills. You can find those online a lot of places. We didn't have that as common back when we were trying to have a baby, and we actually froze our own, where we actually just cut up little pieces of grass-fed liver and then froze it. And I think you had to freeze it for like 18 or 24 days or something like that. You had to freeze it for a long time to make sure you were killing as many pathogens as you could. And then you would just take these little frozen little pills of liver, just swallow them down. And my wife would do that, and that seemed to be very helpful. But now it's a little easier to access just liver pills, and I think that's okay. A really good quality prenatal can be important, and a lot of people that'll just be like, oh, just take a prenatal, everything's going to be great. But if you're getting a prenatal at like the grocery store or some kind of drug store, it's really going to be garbage in most cases. Most of those supplements have binders that even restrict your ability to get the nutrients out of those pills, but then can even further restrict your ability to get the nutrients out of your food. So a lot of those cheap prenatal things are really garbage. I'm not going to give you a brand. You'll have to do some research to figure out what's great, but you really want to get a high quality prenatal vitamin. And then one of the biggest things is to eat real food. If you're just eating junk and thinking that the body is going to work optimally, it's not going to work out. It's not going to go that way. We really want to eat real food and then digest it in a way that we can get the nutrients out of that real food. Another important thing is alcohol. Just don't do it. You got to try and put everything in your favor, right? Well, alcohol is not in your favor. Now, just because a lot of women get pregnant because they drank a lot of alcohol, that doesn't mean that it's going to help you. That's just a different circumstance, right? If alcohol is not helping you get pregnant, then it's really not something you want to do. Because we want to think about, it's not just the harmful aspects of the alcohol, the liver's got to work harder to filter all this stuff out, but it's also a form of liquid sugars. In a lot of cases where someone doesn't have a lot of resources, if they're having sugar crashes, that's when the body really goes into this emergency state. So that's why we talk about down here how important it is to stabilize blood sugar. If blood sugar goes in a spike because a person eats really high carb or liquid sugar type things, then in a lot of cases it's going to create a sugar crash. And when the sugar crashes and minerals are also low, the body really stresses out. That's a really stressful situation for the body. If a person has enough minerals, the sugar can crash and the body won't freak out so much because those minerals can buffer the low sugars. But when both are low, it's a big problem. So with the alcohol, you're going to see, oh man, my Aunt Peggy, she drank the whole time and she had a baby and it was just fine. Well, enough things were working for Aunt Peggy to allow that. If this is the circumstance that you're dealing with, that's not the same story for you. You just want to drop it. This is important to you. Just drop it, and you can celebrate when you drop the kid off at preschool, and you can do some day drinking at that point. The stress in your life, you got to find a way to reduce it. It's really important. It just doesn't make sense for the body to reproduce when it's really stressed. It's not what the body's set up to do. But we also want to think about stress in the body. If you're dealing with some type of infection you might not know about, that can be a problem. If mineral resources are very low, that's a stress to your body. You really want to take these steps to lift the resources to reduce the stress the body is dealing with. Another stress can be overexercising. I had this client that was in amazing shape. She was in fitness magazine cover shape, and she wanted to have a baby, and she was working out every single day, and she's like, I want to be this pregnant woman that's totally ripped. I want to be in the best shape of my life while I'm pregnant. And when I looked at her situation and her numbers and where her physiology was, I had to explain to her, look, you have to pick one. You're not going to be able to do both. Now, that doesn't mean that a woman can't be in great shape while she's pregnant. We see it all the time. But that woman's body is operating at a higher level. It's operating more optimally, and it's not dealing with as many burdens. If your body's dealing with some burdens that you might not even know what they are, you want to put everything in your favor. That doesn't mean you can't work out, but you don't want it to be this overly stressful situation. You don't want it to be every day. You don't want to burn up more resources than you're bringing in. You want to be reasonable about your exercising. So this particular client was working out like a maniac so she could be quote unquote healthier, but she wasn't getting pregnant. She was having a hard time. It was taking a long time. They were starting to think, do we need to do some type of medical intervention or something? But then she reduced the amount that she was working out, and she did a reasonable amount. She took some of these other steps to lift her resources, and now she has 2 beautiful little girls. And liver health is also very important. And a lot of times the liver can't function correctly because that bile is not flowing. When the liver filters out toxins, it puts it in the bile, so when the bile goes through the intestinal tract, it can carry those toxins through the intestinal tract and they go out the back door when we poop like a champion. So a lot of times liver health is really about improving that bile flow if it's become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. But we need the body to be able to filter out toxins. Otherwise, the environment becomes too toxic, and that becomes a big stress to the body. If the environment is not right for reproduction, the woman's going to have a really hard time being pregnant. So we want that liver to be able to function correctly. So that's a lot of things, right? That's a lot of things that you could be working towards getting so that you're putting in your favor. And every woman is not going to need to do all those things. But if you're having a hard time with this, like we talked about, you want to put everything you can in your favor. So when we're looking at the steps that can help, again, this is not to replace any medical advice or replace any medical interventions, but these are things that you can look at yourself, and you can take steps to increase the amount of resources that are coming in the body, allow the body to function a little bit better, and then improve the odds of some of these other medical steps actually working for you. So to just kind of go over, we really want to look at fixing any digestive malfunctions so that we can get all the resources out of the food that we're eating. If resources are low, we really want to take steps to lift those, like we talked about, and we want to reduce any stress in or out of the body. So stress in your life has to be reduced, and any stress that your body is dealing with, you really want to bring it down. You really want to find a way to just simmer down about all this. I know it's hard, I know that it's important, but when you understand how much it's working against what you're trying to do, you're going to find ways to reduce that stress, look at this a little bit differently, and try to be a little more calm about the situation. It really can be the difference between making it happen and just having trouble. And if you're not sure where you lie on that digestive front, we'll put links up here on the screen at the end of the video for our video on 10 signs of low stomach acid and 10 signs of poor bile flow. So you can check those out and see if there's other signs kind of indicating that those might be important for you to correct those. But I really hope that this gives you some answers and some insights that actually make sense. I hope that I get to hear from you that this worked out from you. And if you send me an email and maybe it's got a picture of your new best friend in it, know that that's going to be the best part of my day. I hope this helps.